At the precise moment a human heart stops, the body still contains roughly 20 watts of electrical activity in the brain. That is enough energy to power a small light bulb. It does not vanish. It cannot vanish. And the reason it cannot vanish is a law of physics so absolute that in 300 years no experiment has ever found a single exception to it. The person you lost did not become nothing at the moment they died. Physics does not permit nothing. What actually happened in that instant has a mechanism, and the mechanism is far stranger and far more difficult to dismiss than the word death suggests. Let us be precise about what science can confirm and what it can only make plausible, because that line matters more here than anywhere. In 2013, a research team at the University of Michigan, led by Dr. Jimo Borjigin, published a study in the journal called Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They were measuring the brains of anesthetized rats at the moment of cardiac arrest. What they found was not the flat silence everyone expected. In the first 30 seconds after the heart stopped, the brain did not shut down quietly, it surged. Gamma wave activity, the fastest electrical rhythm the brain produces, the rhythm associated with conscious awareness and the binding of memory, spiked to levels higher than in the normal waking state. The dying brain, for a brief window, became more electrically active than the living one. This is clinically confirmed in the animal data. It has since been observed in dying human patients as well. In isolated cases recorded by accident when a person on an electroencephalogram died during monitoring. In 2022, a team led by Dr. Ajmal Zemmar published exactly such a recording in the journal Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience. An 87-year-old man, wired for seizure monitoring, had a heart attack and died while the machine was running. In the 30 seconds before and after his heart stopped, his brain produced the same gamma rhythms it would produce during memory retrieval and dreaming. What the mechanism suggests, though it remains mechanistically plausible rather than proven, is that the last electrical act of the human brain resembles the act of remembering. We do not know what the man experienced. We may never know, but we know what his neurons were doing. They were doing the thing they do when a life is being replayed. Now follow the energy itself, because this is where physics takes over from neuroscience, and where the mechanism becomes something no one can argue away. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy in a closed system is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form. This is not a theory in the loose sense of the word. It is one of the most tested statements in all of science. Every engine, every star, every chemical reaction ever measured obeys it without exception. And your body, in the instant of death, is a system full of energy. There is the electrical energy in the nervous system. There is the chemical energy stored in the bonds of every molecule. There is thermal energy, heat, roughly 37 degrees of it radiating from the skin. At the moment the heart stops, not one joule of that energy is deleted from the universe. It cannot be. The law forbids it. What happens instead is transformation. The heat begins to leave the body and enters the air of the room. Physicists can measure this precisely. It is called algor mortis, the cooling of the dead, and it proceeds at a rate of roughly 1.5 degrees per hour until the body reaches the temperature of the room around it. That heat does not disappear, it disperses. The warmth that was a person becomes, molecule by molecule, the warmth of the air, the warmth of the bed, the warmth of the hand that is still holding theirs. This is not metaphor. This is calorimetry. The thermal energy that was organized into the shape of a living person spreads outward into everything nearby and is conserved exactly to the last decimal. Think about what that means at the scale of the room. Heat is nothing more than the motion of molecules, atoms, and particles vibrating faster or slower. When a body cools, what is actually happening is that the fast-moving particles at the surface of the skin collide with the slower particles of the air and pass their motion along. The energy migrates. It does not weaken, it does not fade, it simply relocates, one collision at a time. until the whole room is very slightly warmer than it was, and the body is the temperature of the room. Every particle in the air that was warmed by a dying person carries a fraction of the energy that person's body spent a lifetime generating. A physicist with a sensitive enough instrument could, in principle, account for every joule. None of it is lost. It is only that it is no longer gathered in one place, no longer organized, no longer holding a shape. The warmth that was a person is now the warmth of everything, distributed so thinly across the room that no instrument could ever gather it back into the form it once held. Diffusion is effortless. Reassembly is what the universe forbids. Then follow the matter. The atoms that compose the person you lost, the carbon, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the calcium, roughly 7 octillion atoms in an adult human body, that is a 7 followed by 27 zeros, do not cease to exist either. Atoms are, on any human timescale, permanent. A carbon atom that was part of a beating heart is the same carbon atom whether it sits in a body, in the soil, in the trunk of a tree, or in the breath of someone standing at a graveside. It carries no memory of what it was part of, but it does not stop being. The conservation of matter is as absolute as the conservation of energy. The atoms are not subtracted from the world. They are only released from their arrangement, and these are not new atoms. Every atom in the body of the person you loved is older than the sun. The carbon in their hands, the oxygen that filled their lungs, the iron that carried oxygen through their blood, all of it was forged inside dying stars billions of years before the Earth existed, scattered across space, when those stars collapsed and eventually gathered into the world you were both born onto. For a few decades, a specific set of those ancient atoms was arranged into a person. Now that arrangement has ended, and the atoms continue on, as they have continued for the entire age of the universe, and as they will continue long after everyone who remembers the person is also gone. Feynman said it plainly once. He said the atoms that make up a living thing are the same atoms that make up everything else, and that there is nothing in biology that has yet been found to indicate the inevitability of death. The material does not have to die. Only the pattern does. The atoms simply move on to their next arrangement. This is the first thing physics says happens the instant you die. Nothing that made up the person is destroyed. Everything is redistributed. And the difference between those two words is the difference between an ending and a transformation. I've spent months putting together what I'm calling What Feynman Knew About Grief, a companion to everything this channel explores. The link is in the pinned comment below. Stay with me, because the part that most people find hardest to believe is still ahead. What happens to the information, the structure, the specific arrangement that made that person them, and not anyone else, when the atoms go free? Here is where we have to be careful, because there is a real question underneath the sentiment, and physics has a genuine answer to it. When we say a person is gone, what do we actually mean? The atoms remain. The energy is conserved. So what was lost? The answer, in the language of physics, is structure, information, arrangement. A living person is not a pile of atoms. A living person is a specific, staggeringly improbable arrangement of atoms, maintained against the constant pressure of disorder by the continuous input of energy. Every second you are alive, your body is spending energy to hold its own pattern together, to keep the proteins folded, the membranes intact, the electrical gradients charged, the memories encoded in the precise strengths of trillions of synaptic connections. That arrangement is what dies, not the material, the pattern in the material. The second law of thermodynamics describes what happens to that pattern. It says that in any closed system, entropy, the measure of disorder, always increases. The instant the heart stops and the energy input ends, the pattern begins to come apart. The exquisite order that took decades to build begins, slowly at first and then not slowly, to dissolve into the disorder from which it was assembled. This is what death is, in the most rigorous physical terms available. Death is the loss of the pattern. It is the moment the arrangement can no longer pay the energetic cost of remaining itself. And this is precisely why grief feels the way it does. Because you did not love the atoms. You loved the arrangement. You loved the specific pattern, the particular way that 7 octillion atoms were organized into a voice, a face, a set of memories, a way of laughing at exactly the wrong moment. When people say the body is just a shell, they are, without knowing it, stating a law of physics. The material was never the person was the structure. And structure, unlike matter and unlike energy, is the one thing the universe does not conserve. What we're uncovering here is exactly why this channel exists, to follow the physics wherever it leads, even to the hardest place. What Feynman knew about grief connects everything we're looking at today. The link is in the pinned comment. But there is a deeper layer, and it involves a physicist who understood this better than almost anyone because he lived it. Richard Feynman won a share of the Nobel Prize in Physics for work on the behavior of light and matter at the smallest scales. He understood the conservation laws not as facts to be memorized, but as the deepest structure of reality. He knew with total clarity that the atoms of Arlene Greenbaum, the woman he married when they both knew she was dying, the woman he lost to tuberculosis in June of 1945 while he was building the bomb at Los Alamos, he knew those atoms still existed somewhere in the world. He was a physicist. He could not know it, and it did not help. 16 months after she died, he sat down and wrote her a letter. He addressed it to a woman who no longer had, in any physical sense, an address. He wrote about how much he still wanted to discuss things with her, how he had met other people and cared for none of them the way he cared for her, how he loved his wife, present tense, and how his wife was dead. He folded the letter, and he never sent it. It was found in his papers 43 years later, after his own death in 1988. It ends with a line that only a physicist could have written, and only a grieving one. "Please excuse my not mailing this," he wrote, "but I don't know your new address. Consider what that sentence contains." A man who understood the conservation of matter more deeply than almost any human being alive, who knew for a fact that her atoms had not vanished, that her energy had dispersed into the world and been conserved to the last joule, could still not locate her, because he was not looking for her atoms, he was looking for her arrangement. And that was the one thing his own physics told him was gone. The conservation laws gave him no comfort, because the conservation laws conserve the wrong thing. They conserve the material. Grief is about the pattern. The companion guide is in the pinned comment below, only while this video is up. Because what Feynman knew, and what the physics forces on all of us, is the hardest and most honest thing science has to say about death. And here is that thing. Here is what physics actually says happens the instant you die, once you assemble every mechanism into a single statement. The atoms remain. The energy is conserved. The heat you gave off enters the room and is never destroyed. The matter returns to the world and continues, on any time scale that matters, forever. All of that is true, and all of it is confirmed, and none of it is what you have lost. What you have lost is the arrangement, the improbable pattern that entropy is now permitted to undo. That is the asymmetry at the center of grief, and it is a physical asymmetry, not an emotional one. The universe is generous with matter and generous with energy and utterly indifferent to structure. It will conserve every atom of the person you loved and not one detail of who they were. But there is one more thing the physics says, and it is the thing Feynman was reaching for in that unsent letter. And it is not sentiment. It is a consequence of relativity, and it comes from Feynman's own teacher, in a way. When Einstein's closest friend Michel Besso died, Einstein wrote to Besso's family. He wrote that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. He meant it literally. In the mathematics of relativity, the four-dimensional structure that physics calls space-time A moment does not stop existing simply because you are no longer standing in it. Every event that has ever occurred still occupies its coordinates. The laughter, the conversations, the specific afternoon light on a specific face, these are not erased by the passage of time. They are located elsewhere in a dimension you cannot travel back through, but which the equations insist is fully as real as the present you are standing in now. Gone from reach and gone from existence are not the same thing. The physics says the moments you shared have not been subtracted from the universe. They are still at their coordinates. You cannot return to them. That door is one-directional, and the one-directionality is itself a deep and unsolved problem in physics, the arrow of time, the reason entropy increases and never decreases. But the moments are not nothing. They happened, and in the geometry of space-time, what happened is permanent. That is not philosophy. That is what the mathematics says. So the pattern is gone forward and preserved backward. The arrangement dissolves into entropy in the direction you are traveling, and remains fixed and real in the direction you came from. Both of these are true at once. This is the strange, precise, unconsoling, and unerasing thing that physics has to offer about the instant of death. Not that the person continues. The pattern does not continue, but that the person was, permanently, unrevisably, at their coordinates, was. The grief is not evidence that something went wrong. The grief is the exact measure of how much structure was there to lose. You do not mourn what was never there. The size of the absence is the shape of the presence. That is, conservation of a kind physics has no equation for and needs none, because you are the instrument that records it. What we uncovered today has been waiting inside the equations the whole time, and it took a physicist's grief to read it out loud. Before this video ends, thank you, truly. YouTube removed our monetization and kept running ads on our content anyway, collecting revenue while we received nothing. So we created What Feynman Knew About Grief to keep this information alive without depending on a system working against us. If this reached something in you, the link is in the description and pinned in the comments, only while this video is running. He wrote the letter anyway, to an address that did not exist, knowing the physics, grieving in spite of it. We keep making the videos anyway. 20 watts. A small light's worth of electricity surging one last time into the rhythm of memory, then dispersing into the room, into the air, into everything that was ever near. Not destroyed. Only at last set free of the shape it held so improbably, and for so long, and against such odds.